Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Thursday. In fact, Thursday is the day before Friday, so that's pretty good, right? We've made it through the week. Don't forget, there we go. Don't forget there'll be a quiz tomorrow. So again, if you're an in-class student, you can sleep in a little bit, and because we'll start at 9 tomorrow. And if you're an online student, we'll start at the normal time, and we'll do the video conference thing in Microsoft Teams just like we did last time, okay? So study hard. I think all the lecture slides are posted and everything is ready to go, so test day. Let's see who's here. So Elizabeth is here. Good morning, Elizabeth. Hamad is here. Good morning, Hamad. Simran is here. Good morning, Simran. Basil's here. Good morning to you, sir. Sean is here. Good morning. Awais is here. Good morning, sir. Zartaj is here. Good morning, Zartaj. Reza is here. Good morning, Reza. And Basil is here. Good morning to you, Basil. Okie dokie. So, yesterday, yes, we were talking about sexism. And what else were we talking about? Oh, yes, right, I remember. So, we had done a little exercise with the alien, and we talked about what kind of gender norms are and what gender roles are, right? So we did a little exercise figuring out, how men should be and how women should be, right? But of course society has constructed these two roles for us, man and women, and again, there's some biological backing to that because those are basically the two sexes that humans come in, right? We come in male or female sexes. But like I mentioned, there are some people who don't sort of biologically fit into one of those two categories. And similarly with gender, there are people that also don't fit into those two categories as well, right? The categories are somewhat limiting. And as I'm trying to argue here, for the most part, they're socially constructed, right? We've made them up. They're based on biology in some cases. Obviously women can have children and men can't, right? So that's going to influence a lot of the sort of gender norms around what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman. But still, a lot of them are, they're true because we kind of assume them to be true, right? And we train people to act that way. And so we were kind of leading into, oops, I got an extra one. We were kind of leading into this, and yesterday we were watching this documentary called The T Word, right? And the T Word, of course, is not tacos or Tyrannosaurus Rex or anything like that. The T Word is trans, right? And so here we've met Laverne Cox, who's an actress. She's the host here, and she's interviewing a number of transgender youth across the United States, right? And so I had a bunch of questions here, and yesterday we met Ari, the young musician, right? We met Shane, the guy with the girlfriend Jessica. We met Avery, the girl with the kind of long hair. We met Zoe, the young girl in pink. And we met Kai, the basketball player. Did I miss anybody? Did I miss anyone? Is that all the people we've met so far? Oh, and we very briefly met Daniela. Right, Daniela's a black trans woman, and we met her just very briefly, but we'll hear more from her today. And so, just to review some of these questions, we said yesterday that socialization does play a big role, or did and does play. It plays a big role in everyone's life. But for these people, for the people in this documentary, it's a bit of a different situation, right? Because their society is trying to enforce their biological sex on them, right? And so sometimes we see that in terms of, the locker room. Sometimes we see it in terms of family, where people say, no, you were born as a girl or as a boy, and that's who you are, right? Whereas these young people are saying, well, no, that doesn't fit for me, right? That doesn't feel right, I know I'm born into this body, but it's not how I identify inside, right? And I kind of challenged you to think about that idea yesterday: is how do you how do you know what gender you are, right? Like, obviously you can, look in your pants if you if you forgot, right? You can do that, or you can get. But when you look in the mirror, how do you know what's right? How do you know, yeah, that's me versus no, that's not me, right? And we were kind of at the end of yesterday's class, I think we were kind of joking around. I think Ben was joking around a little bit about, having, dressed up as, in girl clothes for a party or whatever. And yes, it's all in good fun, but, there's something, I'm sure there was something about looking in the mirror and saying, oh, this is not right, right? That's wrong. And so, again, we're kind of having some fun with it here, but that's how these young people felt all the time prior to transitioning and sort of expressing themselves to society as their gender identity, right? They were always looking in the mirror and like, no, something's not right here, right? This isn't me, right? And I think we heard that from we definitely heard that from Ari, right, the musician. He was like, yeah, that was just, it never felt right. Shane said the same thing, right? He hated it, right? He hated wearing girl clothes. He hated that whole experience, right? And again, society was trying to convince him of one thing, and he knew something else to be true, right? And it's, it's strange, right? It's probably, again, I don't want to speak for all of you because I don't know what you're thinking and feeling, but it's an experience that I can't imagine what that's like. It must be very difficult, to sort of know something about yourself, and yet, everyone around you sort of is telling you you're wrong. And in some ways, even your physical body is telling you you're wrong, right? Like, again, I can feel like a man in here, and then I can look in the mirror and I'm like, yep, that checks out, right? There I am. But for them, even their physical body is a contradiction of how they feel, right? And I don't know how that must be incredibly difficult, right? It must feel like you're going crazy, sort of thing, right? Because everything is telling you one thing, but something else to be true, right? And again, I'm not sure where the science is on this. I'm not sure why people develop a gender identity that is kind of not aligned with their physical body. I assume there's something going on, when they're developing in their mother's womb, right? And there's, hormones and chemicals being released, and that triggers certain developments this way or that way. And so I assume something is slightly different with trans people, but I don't know. To be honest, I don't know what the science is, and I don't know that question has been really answered yet. But the why is interesting, right? But the what is more important, right? And the what is that, yeah, people feel differently, right? They have different gender identities than their physical bodies, and that's seems to be the way it is, right? Would you say that any of the people that we've met so far in this documentary do they strike you as crazy in any way? Seem pretty normal to me, right? If nobody told you that these people were trans people, then they were just, interviewing these young people, about life or something like that, you wouldn't think anything of it, right? Ari seems like a regular guy, right? Zoe, yeah, she seems like a, normal young 13-year-old girl, right? They are normal kids, right? But in one way they are different, right? We'll get back to this language thing a little bit later. What did we say about Kai and his basketball playing? Kai was playing women's basketball. He sort of came out, if you will, and as a man, and was playing men's basketball, and there was lots of questions about Kai's sexuality and gender, and was he going to have surgery and all of this stuff, and why was Kai being asked about all that?
Because it's more interesting for them
Yeah, it's certainly a story that makes people sit up and pay attention, right? Most basketball stories are like, yep, the team won again, or they lost again. Boring, right? You can only talk about, well, unless you're a basketball fan, you can only talk about basketball so much. But here's this interesting story, right? So, yeah, you can see why they covered it, right? But can you also understand the other side where, Kai doesn't really want to be asked about his sexuality and he definitely doesn't want to be asked about, personal, personal things because I'm sure that, LeBron James probably has a very interesting life, right? It would probably be very interesting to ask him about his personal life and all the parties he's attended and, who he has and hasn't slept with and all that stuff. Yeah, I'm sure that's juicy gossip, right? I'm sure anyone would like to ask it, but we don't, right? At the end of the game, the reporters ask him questions about the game, about the sport, right? Because that's what he's there to do. Those personal questions for LeBron James are out of bounds, right? They're too personal, they're rude, right? But with Kai, it seems that people step over the line, right? And they feel that they are allowed to. And part of that probably has to do with the fact that LeBron is a big superstar, right? He's a big celebrity, and Kai is not yet. But part of it is because of Kai's social identity, right? And so people in minoritized groups, sometimes people in dominant groups feel that they don't have to obey social rules, right? We don't have to give them proper respect. And again, maybe a couple of questions about this whole thing. I mean, when someone transitions from male to female on your basketball team, sure, there's probably a couple of questions that people might want to ask, but there's a line, right? And it can get very personal very quickly, and you don't just ask those things, right? But again, Kai was asked, right? We were talking about this yesterday too. Why did Ari said that he had to sort of deal with some complaints in the boys' change room, right? So some boys were complaining that Ari was watching them pee and things like that, and he said that's ridiculous. But why were these guys uncomfortable with Ari's presence in the locker room? Why were they uncomfortable? Because what? Well, yeah, well, I guess it's a difficulty for them in accepting his gender, right? And the question here kind of is, for me anyway, the question is, who gets to say who you are, right? Who gets to tell you who you are, right? And, again, a lot of things about who we are, we don't choose, right? So, all of us are made up of genes, right? We have DNA molecules that are full of genes. Did you choose any of those genes? Did you choose which ones you have? Did you get to choose your eye color? No, you just got it, right? Do you get to choose your parents? No. Do you get to choose what country you're born in? No, right? Do you get to choose where you went to school when you were young? Probably not, right? Your parents probably just sent you to the school they, thought was best, right? Yeah, so there's a lot of things about our lives that, and about who we are that we don't choose, right? And so the question here is someone like Ari, who gets to say what his gender is? Is it him? Is it his parents? Is it society? Is it the government? Is it God? I mean, like, who gets to say who he is, right? And so that's kind of the question, because, yeah.
I think doctor will tell the person who what gender that is.
Well, yes, but do we have to listen to them, right? See, a doctor can't tell you what gender you are. A doctor can identify your biological sex, right? So they can look at your physical body and say, okay, you have a male body or a female body. If they want to get really in depth, they could check your DNA, right? They could run a DNA test and say, okay, you have two X chromosomes, so you're a female, or you have an X and a Y, so you're a male. Doctor can do that, but who can really determine your gender?
This question can say from everywhere, like from society, from family, from themselves.
Okay, but who should? Who should get to decide? Hmm? Nobody?
I mean,
Well, somebody has to decide. So are you saying like you? The person? Yeah.
ourselves,
Yeah. So and this is kind of the struggle, right? Is that who gets to decide who these young people are, right? And like for Kai, when he's talking to his mom, he's trying to say, "Look, Mom, this is who I am," right? And she's saying, "No, this is who you are. You're, I still see you as my little girl," right? And so she's kind of trying to sort of impose her version or her kind of idea of who Kai is onto him. And Kai's saying, no, that identity isn't right. This is who I am, right? And again, nobody can really know what's going on in here and in here except us, right? We're the only ones who know. And so, this is kind of the battle. And for Ari in the locker room, it's the same thing, right? Who gets to decide what his gender is, right? Ari says, yeah, I'm a guy. I'm a man, right? So he goes into the change room and he changes. Is he interested in looking at other naked guys? No, right? Because he's straight, right? He's interested in women. He's had a bunch of girlfriends. He's interested in Rachel, I think, who comes to his birthday party. He's a straight guy. So he, regardless of what is in his pants, he goes into the locker room and changes, and he's not really interested in looking at anyone else's stuff, right? But these guys have difficulty, the locker room guys have difficulty accepting his gender, right? So they know what his physical body is like, or they know that he was born a female, and so they're trying to impose that on him, right? They're trying to say that, oh no, he's not a guy, right? Or they're confusing his gender with his sexuality and saying, oh, he's watching us pee, right? And gay guys don't watch you pee either. That's weird. But even so, that's not really who Ari is anyway. And even if he was gay, he'd be allowed to go into the boys' locker room because gay guys go into the locker room all the time. That's where they change. So again, it's the struggle of who gets to say, right? Who gets to say who you are. This is where we left off, I think, yesterday with why is dating more difficult for trans people, do you think? Dating is difficult anyway. Because they're
interested or something that they like, I mean, they like girls or boys.
Yeah.
It's different with their body.
Yeah.
They are actually not gays or gay, but they are not straight, and I think it's a little complicated to others to accept this.
Yeah. Yes, it's super complicated, right? Yeah, because again, there's gender identities here, right? And there's sexual orientations here, but there's also physical bodies, right? So we saw, we saw Avery yesterday. She was, I guess, on a dating app, and she was texting with some guy. And Avery is a straight woman, right? She's a trans woman, but she's a straight woman. She's interested in guys. She's talking to this guy, and then, she kind of has to reveal to him that, she's a trans woman, right? Because her body is not that of a typical cis woman, right? And so she tells him, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not into that," right? So this is a tricky one too, right? Because I think part of sexual orientation is the bodies of others, right? You are attracted to a certain gender, but you're also attracted to that body, right? And so it's it's another layer of complexity, right? And so, yeah, if you're attracted to women, okay, but what if that woman has a penis, right? Is that okay with you, right? And for many people, I would suspect it's not, right? And so, for the young man that she is texting with, that's obviously not something he's interested in, right? Now, sorry, go ahead.
I have a question that if they don't surgery, what partner should do? I mean, if they are have like man body, but
Yeah.
they are interested in man too.
Mhm, mhm.
It's the what can we do? I mean,
Well, that's kind of, speaking to that, that's one of the things that Jessica says, right? Jessica is Shane's girlfriend. And yeah, so, Shane says the first time that they, or Jessica, I think, says the first time they were intimate together, Shane's like, look, by the way, I'm going to take off my clothes and this is what you're going to see. And, Jessica's like, well, whatever you have, like you only have two options for what is in your pants, right? There's only two options. And she's like, I've seen both of those things before. So, neither of those things is surprising to me, right? And so some people are, they're fine with it, right? They're like, okay, this is how this person is, and I'm good, right? It doesn't matter to them. But for some people, it does, right? And I think this is going to be my opinion here, but I think that's okay for it to matter, right? Because again, you all have a sexual orientation, right? Whatever it is, don't tell me, it's none of my business. But you all have a sexual orientation, and did you choose that? Did you choose to be straight or gay or lesbian or whatever you might be? No, right? I'm a straight man, but I didn't choose that either. That's just how my brain is wired, right? And so, if you meet a trans person and, you're like, oh, they're kind of cute, but I don't think I'm comfortable with, that physical body. As long as you're not rude or mean, or as long as you're gentle, I think it's okay, right? Because again, you don't get to choose really what you're attracted to either. And so if you're not attracted to, people with a physically male body or with male genitalia, then you're not, right? And so I think it's okay, again, as long as you're, respectful and gentle, and and it's disappointing, right? We saw with Avery, it was super disappointing, right? She was texting this guy, she probably thought he was cute, maybe the text messaging was going really well, and then she has to tell him this thing, and she tells him, and then he's not interested, right? So it's tough, right? It's kind of sad, but he seemed to be respectful, right? But yeah, it's tough, right? It's going to be a little bit harder for trans people to find, someone who's who's going to be into that sort of thing. But sorry, did you want to say something? Okay. But there are people like that, right? Jessica is one of those people, right? She loves. Good morning. Jessica loves Shane, and does she care about what his physical body is? No, right? She's fine either way, right? And so, did the train just get here?
Sorry?
Did the train just get here? Did you all
One
come?
of the trains broke down, so we got stuck for like 30 minutes.
I saw it sitting there.
Yeah.
So dating as a trans person is difficult because again, you've got this sort of physical body to deal with, right? And again, some people are okay with it. I think we almost saw it in the documentary where we left off yesterday, but Avery actually meets another guy, right? And the guy is like, he knows about her and he's, yeah, it's cool, right? And so, not everybody is going to be, interested in that, but some people are, right? And so it's an extra challenge for trans people, but, it can be, there are people out there who are interested or for whom it doesn't matter, right? And again, if it matters for you, I think that's okay, as long as you're gentle and respectful and, try not to hurt anyone's feelings, right? I think we can answer this one question, question 8 here. What is passing privilege?
Like people that really look like a woman, and then you get a pass because they don't think they're like a
Yeah.
transgender.
Yeah, they can pass as the gender that they are portraying to the world, right? And so Shane and Ari, they have passing privilege, right? Those guys walk down the street, you wouldn't think it, you wouldn't notice, right? They look like typical guys, right? Same with Zoe, right? Zoe's a young girl. She looks like your average young girl. Nobody would suspect that she's a trans person, right? But not everyone is able to do that so easily, right? Depending on just what your physical body is. Some people have a hard time kind of passing as the gender that they're expressing to the world, right? And so, you can, some trans people are going to have an easier time and some trans people are going to have a harder time depending on, whether society easily sees them as the gender they're sort of expressing themselves as, right? And so like Ari and Shane, for the most part, no one's going to know that they're trans, and probably Kai too, right? But others, of course, it's going to be tougher, right? And the less kind of passable they are, the more probably prejudice and discrimination they're going to face. Yeah. And that's not fair either, but that's how it that's how it currently works, right? Okie dokie. So, can we watch the rest of this documentary? Are there any questions that people would like to ask at this point? Yeah. Yeah. So if you are a trans person, you don't have to, of course, but many opt to take hormones, right? And so for men, one of our primary sex hormones is testosterone, right? And the sort of production of that in our bodies makes us kind of hairier, makes us a little more muscular, lowers our voice a little bit, right? Those things are all the effects of testosterone. So yeah, Kai is going to take his testosterone injections. It's going to give him a little bit of facial hair, right? Lower his voice, help him build a little more muscle mass, which he seems to be putting on, right? So, and then trans women will take estrogen, right? And estrogen will have kind of the opposite effect, right? Women are a little bit less hairy. They don't build muscle quite so easily, but they do build fat in certain parts of the body, right? It's going to change their voice a little bit, and so it'll help them to pass, right? And so, particularly if you're younger or if you're before puberty, the use of those hormones can really help you appear as your gender identity, right? Without them, you're really stuck in a male body, right? And so, lots of trans people take them, I think, but you certainly don't have to. You don't have to do any of that stuff, right? You don't have to have surgery. You don't have to take hormones, but you can, right? Depending on how sort of masculine or feminine you want to appear to society, right? And I think that probably, I would say Ari and Shane and Kai are definitely taking testosterone, right? So the lower voice, all of them have some facial hair some scruffy facial hair going on. So they're probably all taking hormones, and I would assume Daniela is as well, who we met very quickly. Zoe's young, but I don't know. I don't know what's going on with her. Yeah, so I think a lot of trans people will take them. Yeah. Other questions? No. Okay. So let's jump back in here. So trying to remember where we were at yesterday, and I feel like we were at 35 minutes. Is that correct, or do you have just no idea? No idea? Okay. That's my job to pay attention to, so that's my bad. Let me just see if I can. I'm gonna. Okay. Yeah. Let me just. Online people, just bear with me for 2 seconds. I'm just going to try to figure out where we were yesterday, and then I'll tell you where to start from. Okay. Oh man, hang on. Even though I have some technical difficulties sometimes, I felt really good after watching that thing we watched in history yesterday where it was just a disaster. So I think I feel much better about my tech abilities here. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. So let's start. Hang on, I gotta get back in here so I can use the live chat. Yeah, so let's start at 26 minutes. Okay. Let's start at 26 minutes, online people. We'll watch till the end, and then we'll take a break. Okay. So watch the rest of the documentary, take a break, and then come back and we'll talk about what we've seen. Okay. So we'll see you in just a little bit. Mute. Okay, and we are back. So, seems like a mostly happy ending for everybody in the T word, right? We've kind of wrapped up everyone's stories. So, the last two questions here are why are trans people the victim of bullying and discrimination and harassment, and in some cases violence, right? Assault and murder, right? Why are these people often the victims? Because people, well, yeah, because people think they're different, right? And in some ways, they are, right? So society's kind of created two categories, men and women, and trans people don't fit into those categories, right? They're seen as different, right? And again, because do you remember I showed you a long time ago that kind of iceberg picture of culture? Yeah, so ideas about gender and sexuality are kind of very deeply held, right? And so again, when you violate those ideas, people will, have a strong reaction to them. And so, yeah, in some ways, transgender people do kind of violate some of those rules, right? The culture, if your culture says that there's only two genders and that, people only have sex with members of the opposite sex, then yeah, the existence of trans people is kind of a violation of those deeply held ideas, right? Deeply held norms. And so, yeah, society does see them as different, right? And reacts to them. Maybe a way you can think about this is, it's, in a way, it's almost the same as, oh no, is it?
Yes.
You don't know what I'm thinking. Don't try and get me in trouble. I can get in trouble very well on my own. Thank you. Let me see. Well, maybe we could think of this as a super extreme example of the same kind of pattern that we've seen, right? Where a social rule is violated and people try to encourage others to follow the rule, right? And so, in the Seinfeld episode, we saw, a humorous thing where George double dipped the chip, and the other guy at the party, Timmy, tried to correct his behavior, right? George had violated a social norm, and Timmy was like, no, this is the rule, stop doing what you're doing, right? And so we said earlier that we're all constantly doing that, right? We're trying to encourage each other to follow the rules. But here we have, a very extreme example, right? Where, according to society, trans people may be violating social norms, right? And so because those norms are so deeply held, people have a very strong reaction trying to get them to follow the rules, right? Stop being so dramatic and weird and just, be the gender that you're supposed to be, right? That you were born as, or that God says you're supposed to be, or whatever the sort of rationale is for it, right? And so, we could probably see some of this behavior on a similar spectrum, but it's just, very extreme, right? And it calls into question a lot of deeply held beliefs that people have. On that topic, at the end of the T word, the Avery and Daniela and Laverne went to the site where that woman was murdered, right? Elon Nettles. And so I looked her up because, in the documentary they said that, no charges had been laid, nothing is happening, even though, the murder happened in front of a police station and the police pulled the guy off of her, right? And so, Laverne is saying, how are you not able to charge someone when the police catch you in the process of committing the crime, right? Like, how is this not happening? And so, the man who assaulted her and ultimately caused her death was sentenced in April of 2016. And so, and here's the social norm violation part, or the emotional reaction part. This man, James Dixon, that's the guy who went to jail. James Dixon, 25, pleaded guilty to manslaughter this month in State Supreme Court in Manhattan, admitting he attacked the woman, Elon Nettles, on a street in Harlem just after midnight, August 17th, 2013, knocking her to the pavement with one punch and then hitting her again as she laid on the sidewalk. Hang on. In written and videotaped statements, he told detectives that he had started flirting with Ms. Nettles, unaware she was transgender, after meeting her and two friends on the street. He said he became enraged and attacked her when his friends began mocking him for trying to pick up a transgender woman. I just didn't want to be fooled, he said. So, what's that?
What do we see?
Well, that's the thing, right? Is that it's not really that he didn't want to be fooled, right? That's not quite it. What is it?
Fear.
What's that?
The fear pressure that he had probably made him react that way, but that's not a reason to.
No, well, it's a pretty, yeah, it's a bad reason to kill somebody, right? Not that I want to get into finding good reasons, but yeah, but what's really going on for him? Yeah. Yeah, because there's a lot of anti-gay prejudice, right? Particularly among straight men, right? Straight men often have a very strong aversion to homosexuality, and the worst thing would be to be perceived as gay, right? And so, again, it's the binary opposite thing, right? To be a man is not to be a woman, right? And to be a real man, quotes, is to not be gay, right? Being gay is like the opposite of being a real man, right? And so, yeah, this guy mistakes, well, he doesn't mistake Elon Nettles, because Elon Nettles is a woman, right? She's expressing herself as a woman, but he finds out that she's not. His friends say, ha ha, and then, yeah, he has a very strong emotional reaction to that, and kills her, right? By the way, he got 12 years for that. 12 years in prison. I don't know if you feel that's too much or not enough or just right. Charge was manslaughter. Do you know how those murder charges work here? Manslaughter is the lightest one. First degree murder is where it's premeditated and it's planned. So you thought about killing someone, you made a plan, you made all the arrangements, and then you went through with it, right? Third degree murder is where you killed someone on purpose, but it was like you just lost it kind of thing, right? Like you just flew into a rage and murdered somebody. You didn't plan it ahead of time, but you meant to kill them. Manslaughter is where you killed someone, but that wasn't your intent, right? You weren't trying to kill them, but you did. And so here it's manslaughter because it's not, I don't think he was trying to murder Elon Nettles, but he hit her, she fell to the pavement, she hit her head, he hit her again, and then she died from brain injuries several days later. So he wasn't trying to murder her, but she is now dead. And so, yeah, that's why he gets manslaughter. But again, is 12 years too little or not enough? Is this a hate crime? Yeah, right? Yeah, the violence was motivated by was motivated by the social group that Elon belonged to, right? She's a trans woman. And so, yeah, this hopefully, I didn't see it in the article, but hopefully it was highlighted as a, you know, her gender was an aggravating factor in this assault, right? If she was a regular woman, if she was a cis woman, she wouldn't have been assaulted, right? She would have told him to take a hike, right? And he probably would have, right? But her gender was an aggravating factor in this, right? And so we kind of see that. So people can have a strong emotional reaction to transgender people because they're different. They can have extreme emotional reactions because of what they think it means about them, right? And this case with Elon Nettles is just that, right? Did Elon Nettles do anything really? Did she do anything wrong? No, right? But this guy felt his sexuality was challenged, right, or under threat, and so he kind of lost it. What happens to Daniela? Daniela is raped, right? And then what happens? She goes to the hospital. And what? Yeah. So she goes to the hospital and they do what's called a rape kit, right? So they try to collect any sort of fluid, any sort of genetic evidence that they can use to identify the attacker in court later on, right? So there's swabbing and putting things in vials and things like that. I assume, I don't know, I've never had one done. But of course, as soon as the information comes out that Daniela is not a cis woman but a trans woman, what happens? Well, the lenses come down, right? Now we're not dealing with Daniela anymore. We're like, oh, are you sure this isn't sex work? Are you sure you're not a prostitute? Are you sure, maybe you you had sex with him and then he didn't pay and you were angry, right? And now you're taking your revenge kind of thing. And yeah, it's the same thing as the resumes. It's the same thing as, the stereotypes come down, right? And Daniela's just been through this horrible traumatic event, and now, she's at the hospital where people are supposed to care for her, and, they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe this isn't the real thing, right? Even if she was a prostitute, she's not, but even if she was, can a prostitute be raped? Yeah, right? Because rape is a sexual assault with no consent, right? And so, yeah, prostitutes can say no too, right? And so even if she was, that doesn't let the nurse off the hook here, right? But of course, Danielle is just a regular person who, again, wasn't treated with compassion or respect because of her gender identity, right? And yeah, and she went through a horrible thing, right? Any other reason why? Well, I guess this is more question 10. Why might someone like Daniela be particularly vulnerable? Okay, so her ability to.
She doesn't have a passing.
Well, I don't know. I think it's. I don't know.
You kind of tell them.
Kind of. So there's an issue of passing privilege, right? Whether people, actually feel that she's a cis woman or not. So that's one reason. But what's another reason why she might be particularly vulnerable, or women like her? She's what's that?
Viewed differently.
Yeah, well, she's viewed differently, but yeah, Victoria says she's kind of a member of a bunch of different minoritized groups, right? She's black, she's a woman, she's a trans woman, right? And so that makes her very vulnerable. Did you see the statistic they put up on the screen where was it violence against LGBTQ youths? 41% of that violence was directed at.
50 was against trans people.
Yeah.
Or trans women.
Right. So even within a minoritized group, these trans women are extra vulnerable, right? And so, yeah, this is something that we may have mentioned at this point and we may not have, but it's something called intersectionality, right? So the idea that these people here that we've just met, and all of us, are the members of multiple social groups at the same time, okay? And that all affects our experience of society and how we're treated, right? And so Daniela will experience, she will interact with people, and society will interact with her as a trans woman of color, right? As a black trans woman. And for her, it's going to be difficult to tell how those different identities are affecting her experience, right? If someone acts, if someone is a jerk to her or is discriminates towards her, it will be difficult for her to tell whether it's, is it because she's black? Is it because she's a woman? Is it because she's a trans woman? It's tough to kind of know, right? And so those identities never really exist separate, right? She's always all of those things at the same time. And it's difficult to know what is causing obstacles to be put in her way, right? In the same way, I am a white male Canadian, right? So I have advantages, or I have fewer barriers in the living of my life. But it's tough to know when that's happening, and it's tough to know whether it's because of my race or my citizenship or my gender, right? Or my devilishly good looks. It's hard to know, right? It's hard to know what's happening because, again, we're never just one thing, right? We're never just black or white or men or women or citizens or immigrants or Christians or Muslims or whatever. We're always a combination of things at the same time, and people see us as that, right? And so people see Daniela or Laverne or Ari or Avery or Lorraine. They see all these people as all of their identities at once, right? And all of those things will influence their experience in society. And it'll influence their experiences in a way that you just can't separate, right? You can't say, well, this happens because she's black and this happens because she's a trans woman. They're all glued together, right? And you can't separate them out. That's intersectionality. And so for Daniela, she's a member of a few minoritized groups, and it makes her extra vulnerable, right? And it makes her, if we can go back to the ableism documentary, it makes her extra deserving of protection, right? And compassion, because she's liable to experience so much discrimination and potentially violence, right? And she did experience sexual violence. I feel like there was one more thing I wanted to say. Okay. Would anyone else like to ask any more questions about the sort of content of this documentary, or make any statements about what you think or feel, or? Is it? One thing that's surprising to me, and maybe it's not surprising to you, or maybe it is, but how big a deal this actually is, right? Like, certainly someone's gender identity is a big part of who they are, right? Rafay, you're a young man sitting in front of me. I assume being a man is a part of your identity, right? It's a part of who you are. But the fact that you're a man, does that really influence my life at all?
No.
If you happen to be a young woman sitting in front of me, would that really change my life? Not really. Sorry, not that you're, but you know what I mean, right? Like, your gender identities do not affect my life whatsoever, right? And yet, it seems to be a pretty massive deal, right? People have a lot of trouble with this sort of thing, and yet, does this affect anyone's life beyond, maybe the trans person and maybe their partner, right? Their intimate partner, and maybe their parents, right? Their parents probably have to make a bit of an adjustment. But like, whose life does this really affect? Right? How is this a problem? Right? If you're a young woman or a young man, you're a student sitting in front of me, right? That I am here to hopefully educate, right? Your gender doesn't really make that much difference to me in terms of my life experience. And so it's really interesting how much of a problem some people have, even though it doesn't change things. But why do you think that is, though? Why do you think it's such a thing?
It's not the norm.
It's not the norm.
I guess it's more common now. So like a few years ago, it wasn't that common. It was still pretty new. Not many people understood anything about it.
Yeah. True. Although I would rephrase it and say that it's not necessarily new. It's just that it's safe enough to
People are more open about it.
to talk. Yeah. Yeah. It's safe enough to say something. Yeah.
Maybe because we see that everything really new. I mean, we say blue or something can imagine something that a more of this or man or woman.
Yeah.
And when we saw it's real analysis and we can separate and put them into the school,
Mhm.
we become confused and we want to cancel it or
Yeah. We really want to put things in one box or the other, don't we? As human beings, we really want to say, is it this or is it that? Right? Just tell me what it is. It's too confusing. There's so much gray area. Just tell me what we're talking about, right? And you see this online all the time, right? People want to know, is something right or wrong, good or bad? Did we do the right thing or the wrong thing? And we just think there's two categories, and nothing is that simple, right? It's everything kind of, the world is more complicated, right? And humans are infinitely complicated, right? How long have we been studying ourselves, would you say, as sort of scientific subjects? Hmm? Sure. If you want to take the sort of beginnings of science maybe back to ancient Greece, right, to sort of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, yeah, we've been scientifically studying ourselves for 2,500 years. And do we know everything about ourselves? No, right? We're still a mystery, right? There's still things about us we don't understand, right? And yeah, we're immensely complicated creatures. And so, again, does it make sense that everything can just be put into one bucket or another? Probably not, right? Is there just two kinds of people in the world? No, right? Lots of different types of people. Sometimes it just depends on which day you catch them, right? It is crazy, right? But that's what's fun, right? There's always something new to learn about human beings and how we act and what we are. And any other last questions or comments about this topic? We can always ask them another time, but since we're on this topic. Okay, well, I have something for you to do that is kind of related to one of these questions, but I think, having 9 minutes left, I don't think we'll be able to do it. So maybe what I'll do is I'll end it there. Don't forget quiz tomorrow. In-class people, you get to sleep in a little and you can come in at 9 and write. Online people, I'll see you at 8 and we'll do the Microsoft Teams thing, okay? So good luck, study hard, have a nice afternoon, and I'll see you tomorrow, or I'll see you in 20 minutes. Okay? All right.